So I've been playing a lot of One More Dungeon 2 lately, and if it's one thing I've learned, we really need to keep our eyes on snails. If you don't know about this game, there is a snail king, and in a snail kingdom, where a human happens to venture in accidentally and is then taken capture and is expected to go to the dungeon below and clear out all the enemies, monsters, and even some weird beings from like parallel universes. And as nice as it would be to have a giant can of salt, all we have is a stick of some form and a magical wand, which is nice, but none of that is available to us until we are in the dungeon itself. So we're stuck going through this dungeon, trying to defeat all the monsters we can, and only wishing for death to be our only escape. Well, except for it's not. Usually when you die, you just get teleported right back up to your cell, where you're reminded you are the Snail King's property, and you letting him down, he doesn't approve of. You need to get your butt back to work. Let's talk about One More Dungeon 2, but before we get into that, please hit that like, subscribe button. It helps the channel out, it helps me out. It's really important to see this channel grow. So anyway, going back into One More Dungeon 2, like I said, I've played quite a bit of the game, and I actually ended up liking this game a lot more than I thought I would. Most dungeon crawlers, to me, are sort of difficult, and the same with them being attached to like that roguelike system that a lot of games have. So I was honestly not that excited once I learned it was a roguelike, and once I saw like the dungeon crawling aspect. Like, don't get me wrong, I do like dungeon crawlers. It's just sometimes that first person hand-to-hand combat sort of game can sometimes be really punishing. Like, they almost want to make their own Dark Souls in a way. And this game is not like that at all. Now, I was more excited to find the loot than I was able to actually find. There were aspects of the game that I wish there was a little bit more of, but honestly, I enjoyed my time. It was a little bit laggy, and I did have an issue with that, like, from time to time, but it typically happened more inside of the Snail King's castle than it did in the dungeons, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because you'd think there'd be more enemies on the field and that would be a bigger problem and pull down the game in some way, but it didn't. It was actually just more in the actual castle. Like I said before, I was really more excited for it to be more of a looter than it is just a roguelike dungeon crawler, but it was fine how it turned out being, because there again, those two things to me, roguelike, dungeon crawler, typically lean on that like get good mentality, but this wasn't that at all. And I'm not saying this game isn't difficult. There's many times I had runs where just nothing went my way. It wasn't finding anything good. The enemies got really difficult really quickly. Like, one of the aspects of the game is madness and the doom level. These two things you sort of have to watch out for. When madness is turned on, these different creatures from different parallel universes are the ones that show up, and they will mess you up. Like, they're not to be played with. You really have to be on your game when you're dealing with them, as well as having like sort of a curse aspect with the doom level. There are different little mechanics that are present throughout the game, but I would say honestly most of it plays just like how you would expect it to. It is, for the most part, magic wielding and hand-to-hand combat. Yeah, you can use both to your advantage. At the same time, I would argue that the mapping system for me was just a little bit off. I didn't love it, but it wasn't awful. I never really got lost in the game, and that is something I really did appreciate. Graphically speaking, the game looked pretty good. Like, it wasn't great, but it's not awful either. Like, there's a lot of disturbing imagery in the game and really messed up looking creatures, and all of that really does come through the game. So that is nice. It's not overly pixelated, yet at the same time, like, they don't go for such a realism that it looks bad. You know what I mean? So it does have that going for it. And I will say, like, it's one of those games that I found I could just kind of pick up and play. You know, if it was going to be for 30 minutes or for an hour, or even like sometimes just like 10 minutes, and then I'd pause it and go do something else and come back to it. The game does have this overarching story, but honestly, it doesn't get too convoluted or complex or anything, like giving it that ability to be a pick up and play type game. And there was so many times when I was playing the game and I would get a lot deeper into a run than I thought I was going to be able to, and only to come across a really nasty enemy, die, and immediately think, oh, I just lost everything, and then realize that it's not as restrictive of a roguelike. You only lose about 50% of your stuff, so that also was kind of nice to not completely be penalized for dying. But ultimately, I think it's a pretty fun little game. Is it, as you play through it and as you unlock different bosses and levels, you unlock different classes, and you're really able to explore a bigger part of the game. Like, it starts off rather linear and opens up quite a bit. Now, ultimately, is this like game of the year type material or anything like that? No, of course not. But it is what it is, and it's pretty fun. I would honestly say that this is one that I personally would probably wait for a sale, but it's still not that bad. Like, it's $14.99, and if you're into that style of game, it's definitely worth it. There's a lot of fun to be had. But if you're on the fence, I probably would wait for maybe like a 20% discount, something of that nature, and then it would definitely be worth it. I would like to see a little bit of a patch for just like a tad bit of delay. I don't know, it's very weird. It didn't really affect my play through at all, but it was just enough to be distracting at times. And ultimately, if I was going to give this game a score, I think I would give it a solid 6.5 out of 10. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are you excited for this game? Is this one that you've heard of, or maybe one you haven't? Do you like dungeon crawlers / roguelike type games? Games where it's really all about just exploring dungeons. Anything and everything down in the comment section is much appreciated. I love each and every one of you guys. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.